But wherever you are in the world, as always, everybody, I hope that you're safe and healthy and well. And thanks for making the time for this next installment of our series of a Tuck board chat. Again, these have been wonderful innovation. We started in the spring and have continued into the fall. And boy, we'll just continue these for the many moons, even after the pandemic, I think. It's a real opportunity for students and other members of the community to really spend some closer time with some of our most accomplished and generous alums who serve on our advisory boards and councils, and just share a lot of their time and insights in helping us at Tuck think about how the world is and our relevance and how we live our mission. So we're very fortunate this evening to have three of our Tuck alums. I'll introduce them in a moment, and the topic is going to be kind of industry shifts and thinking about kind of how these C-suite leaders, Kate, Rick, and Jim, have been thinking about observing shifts in their industry, what the response has been strategically and culturally inside their organizations, and kind of where they see the world going. The economist in me can't help but notice, as we were talking yesterday and getting together a little bit, well, let me introduce them and then I'll make my economist point. So I'll go, I guess, from newest to our advisory boards and councils to oldest. We've got Kate Chiveri. Kate's a T03. She currently serves as Chief Marketing Officer for the National Basketball Association, the NBA. Kate serves on our NBA Council along with Rick Cardenas. So Rick, a T98. Hey, Rick, is Chief Financial Officer and Senior Vice President at the Darden Restaurants. The Darden family of restaurants includes, Rick, help me, Olive Garden is one that a lot of people know. A few other ones are?
Longhorn Steakhouse, Capital Grill, Eddie V's. We own 8 brands.
Great, thanks. And then on our board of advisors, our third Tuck alum who's joining us this evening is Jim Weber. Jim's a member of the Great Tuck Class of '86. He is chairman and CEO of Brooks Running Company. And so he's based out in the Pacific time zone in the Seattle area. And Brooks, in case you don't know, is one of the portfolio companies of Berkshire Hathaway. So I guess, sorry, Jim, I guess I'd say your boss is Warren Buffett. So hey to everybody. I will now make my economist remark, which is we've got different parts of broad consumption demand. So you second years, remember from Jem, we got consumption demand as part of the supply equals demand at national income accounting. But we've got a non-durable good for people, which is gym and running, Brooks and the shoes. We've got restaurants with Rick. We've got entertainment with Kate and the NBA. And we agreed that we'll structure the conversation with us chatting a little bit before we open it up to the community with comments and questions chronologically. And we thought we'd start by saying, let's start with January, February, pre-pandemic. And maybe as a way of introduction, you could say a little bit about your roles and just kind of where were your organizations in the industry before the tragedy of the pandemic became so salient and prevalent on our planet. And then we'll move through learning in the pandemic and kind of where we are today. So we're going to kind of march through 2020 with these three Tuck alums. And we always speak about wise and decisive leadership. Part of that is being lifelong learning. And so I think we're going to focus on kind of how are they learning along the way. But we'll set it up first with the context before the pandemic earlier this calendar year. Kate, maybe we'll start with you. A lot of us know the NBA, but what was your role and how were you seeing the NBA earlier this calendar year?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here and see all these people. I just met Rick and Jim, so it feels great to be back in the Tuck community. So I joined the NBA in August of last year, so I've been here just a year. And people jokingly tell me we never had these problems until you joined, Kate. It has been a really emotional and challenging year for us. If you start January 1st, actually, our former commissioner, David Stern, passed away suddenly. And on the heels of that, there was the terrible accident where Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi also were killed. And so January, February, and early into March really felt the shockwaves across the NBA around how to deal with those two moments. You know, David had been such a huge part of building the NBA, and we were really looking forward to the rest of the season and specifically rolling into playoffs and finals to really help bring back the joy of the game and the sense, both among our fans and employees, just of the power of the NBA, and kind of remind everyone about, what it feels like to be a fan and how the game can feel excited. So, when we rolled into March, and we started to hear about the pandemic, we were a bit, coming off of some other big challenges for the organization, and so it felt like we were rolling right into another one. I don't know if that's how Jim or Rick, you felt in your organizations.
Kate, thanks for kicking us off, and I appreciate that you guys were seeking to build more joy at that time. I totally understand that. Rick, how about you? How was it in Darden and early this calendar year?
Sure. January, February was actually a really good time for us. We had just come, our fiscal years are a different timing. So it was our third quarter, December, January, February is Q3 for us. We were in the midst of a really great quarter. We didn't see a whole lot of impact on the pandemic back early in late February when you started to see, you heard a little bit more about it in Seattle and I'm sorry, Portland. But then things changed. And I'll give you an idea of how big the change was for us. We were a $9 billion sales company, kind of trailing 12 months February, with a $14.5 billion market cap. I'm sorry, $14.5 billion enterprise value. So big company. On March 17th, 18th, I think, is when we had our quarterly board meeting and earnings call. That day of our earnings call was our low price for the year. So our stock had gone from about $110 a share to $34 a share within 2 weeks. So we went from a $15 billion enterprise value to a $5 billion enterprise value like that. And that was 2 days before all of our dining rooms closed. And so I will tell you what we did after that, but it was within a 3 week period, we went from euphoria to, are we going to survive? And then we'll see what we did after that.
Wow. Okay. Euphoria to, are we going to survive in 21 days? Got it. Okay. Jim, to round it out at the beginning.
Absolutely. So, we came into the pandemic with great momentum. We'd been growing double digit, 10 to 20%, literally every month for coming on 2 years. We had stumbled on supply chain in 2019. So it was a good year, not a great year, but we worked so hard on execution. We came into March when the pandemic came to the US shores, executing incredibly well, just ratcheting 10 to 20% every month and gaining a lot of market share, really well positioned. And we're an inventory business, right? Athletic footwear and apparel, seasons, colors, sizes, floor sets for retailers, campaigns in and around events and Boston Marathon, et cetera. So, we watched this virus roll through our supply chain in Asia, and it proved to be very resilient. Our factories closed for a while, but they ended up getting back up, and there's a lot of discipline on protocols over there, as we all know. And then we watched it hit Europe. We've got a nice business in Europe. We've got we'll do probably 850 million this year, 1,000 employees, but growing really nicely. And anyway, Europe, it went like that. Pan-European, the stores closed in 1 week. Every store closed, from Scandinavia to Italy. It was incredible, and it just froze. And then Seattle, had the virus first, so we saw that happen out here, and it just rolled across the United States. So this is such a great case study for Tuck. I mean, just like Rick, we had everything going the right way. We were on all cylinders, and it literally froze. And we have 92% of our units go through a retailer. So none of the stores were open. Obviously, websites were, and that saved us and is an exciting way as we're growing. But the point in March, everything just froze. 150 million receivables, a couple $100 million of footwear and apparel on the water coming in to no demand or seemingly no demand. So, we had a lot of things. We had finished our business continuity plan 6 months earlier. We lit that up, daily stand-ups, sense of urgency around everything related to supply chain and business and cash management and supporting our retailers and customers, weekly town halls. I mean, we just went into an urgent, triage mode, trying to figure it out. And for us, we feel so fortunate. We're really lucky. If we were running races, you went to zero and virtual. The Olympics didn't happen, as we know. Track and field and cross country at the high school and college level are not happening. None of the road races are. So the sport is shut down, but yet people are running. We saw the demand shift to digital, and then actually brick and mortar has come back. But we're fortunate it made the cut. People are running, and we are able to move our supply chain around. We're actually going to be up for a record year over last year. We're very fortunate.
Okay, wow, you guys set the stage really wonderfully as it envisioning the calendar months on the wall calendar. So that's January, February, and into March, and you all gave us a sense of like suddenly, and I'm underscoring that adverb, how fast things changed for all of you. Euphoria to are we going to survive, and Rick's words. So now I'm wondering if you guys could share a little bit about March, April, that kind of realizing this was above and beyond the global tragedy, a fundamental business existential threat. How did you learn? Like, how did you and the other C-level executives, what was qualitatively with an example, like how were you trying to process this information for something, like you said, Jim, you've done stand-ups in preparation, but few organizations had modeled this and prepared for it and knew what to think about. So how, as you moved into the spring, March, April, how were you learning and how are you trying to make sense of this? Maybe Kate, I'll bring it back to you and we'll cycle through again. Like, how was it and what were you learning? How, as a lifelong learner, how were you trying?
Would you like me to go first, Matt, on that?
Oh, maybe Kate, I'd bring it back to Kate and just bring it back through that way. Yeah.
All right, Jim. For me, the pandemic has a very specific start date. I know that it was going much sooner than this, but for us, March 11th is the day that we had to pause our games because one of our players, Rudy Gobert, tested positive right before the game that night. And for health and safety reasons, we obviously, for both our fans and our players and staff, we paused the game, and we paused the season. And it really felt from that point on, not to really sound arrogant, but it really felt like the world kind of paused with us from that day. We saw a number of other sports and other brands really start to take it seriously. And if you remember back to March, we knew so little about COVID and we really understood very little about the virus and how to stay safe. And so, and just from a business model standpoint, we make money primarily through tickets and in-arena sales. So that's when you come and see a game and you buy a sweatshirt or food and beverage and buy a ticket to sit on the floor. And then also through our marketing partners and our TV partners who broadcast our content around the globe. And so when we pushed pause, we stopped virtually all of our revenue coming in on that day. And so we had to get up to speed really, really quickly. And Adam instantiated daily, 7 days a week, leadership meetings where—
Adam, the commissioner, just so everybody knows, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Adam Silver, the commissioner. My boss established daily senior leadership team meetings, and we were taking in as much information as we can. We had, by virtue of our brand and our relationships, we were able to meet with Vivek Murthy, who's now leading the COVID task force for President-elect Biden. We also met with David Ho, who is a virologist at Columbia. And ultimately, as we started to build our programs, we talked to almost every person who was thinking about COVID in some way, shape, or form, because we knew that this would be at the center of our business, not just for the next 4 months. It was really clear to us early on that this was going to be something that was going to be central to our business for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years to come. And that certainly is where we are today. And so on health and safety, we learned a lot from, all of these preeminent virologists and we talked with the CDC and also Dr. Fauci eventually looked at our plan and then, we really wanted to end the season. We really wanted to have a team lift the Larry O'Brien trophy. And so we started to think about how we would do that. And so on one side, you have the health and safety, and on the other side is how do you pull off a single site location for 22 teams with the health and safety protocols where everyone will be safe and at the same time entertain millions of fans around the world and have that content be incredibly entertaining and good. And so this had never really been done in sports before. The Olympics does things like this, but really a 3-mile campus where no one can leave and you get tested on a regular basis was new. And so we talked to everybody from Disney to any kind of entertainment company you could imagine to really understand how we could really build this. And at the same time, we know that our fans are hungry for content. And so while we are in the background learning and trying to figure out how we're going to navigate this going forward, we also feel this immense responsibility to help our fans deal with this and to use our platform to help educate people. And so we started a campaign, I hate to call it a campaign because it's so much more, called NBA Together, where we were focused on two things. One is how could we lend our platform to educate fans and raise money for frontline workers? And in that case, we were able to put get a number of players to put together all of these PSAs, which we were able to drive across TV and social, which reached over 600 million people. And then we were able to raise $100 million for PPE for frontline workers. And so from that perspective, it was really successful. And what we learned is a whole new way to engage fans. I'll wrap this up, but we really came to understand a variety of different ways to engage with our fans in new ways, because a lot of people were sitting at home, not leaving their houses, and we had an opportunity to engage them, not just on social channels, but across digital, across a number of different ways with new content. That I think from a marketing standpoint and from a content standpoint, we'll keep using long after the pandemic because it's just good and fans love it. But really for me, the learning was twofold, both in really getting up to speed on RNOTs and health and safety protocols, as well as how do we continue to think about our business and really drive our business forward at a time when revenue has been completely paused.
Thank you. That was a tour de force, and I'm struck at how you were looking outwards so much. You know what I mean? I heard you say, like, probably in January, you never would have thought, I'm going to wake up today and be in a meeting with Anthony Fauci, or I'm going to talk to the folks at Disney, and just, you know what I mean? Just the openness to be realizing that's what you need to do, even though it's something you never anticipated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, great. Okay. Rick, take us to, you said it was doing great, and suddenly you weren't clear if you were going to survive. Euphoria to are we going to survive? How do you learn at that point? Especially because you're contemplating as a publicly traded entity and you're looking at your balance sheet and your income statement, worrying about surviving. How do you learn in that?
So I won't add to the things that Kate said about what we learned about the pandemic and all of the people that we talked to in the medical field, et cetera.
But you had to do the exact same thing, right? Which, like,
we had to do
same thing. You got to bring people together, the producers and consumers. I got to learn a bunch about things I never thought I'd learn. Okay. Yep.
Well, and bigger than that, because we feed people, right? And so you're in an enclosed place, and although we deal with viruses all the time that are actually more contagious than COVID, they're just not as lethal. But so we know how to keep people safe. But I'll come back to that. As you think about where we were on that day of our board meeting, and then the next day the earnings call, the day later, we made the decision without a mandate to close all of our dining rooms before anybody else in our space did. So we closed them on a Friday or a Saturday. We went to off-premise only. We weren't really ready for that, but we thought it was the right thing to do to make sure we kept our team members safe and our guests safe. But what most of you probably don't know about the restaurant business is we're a negative working capital business. right? So we pay for, we get our, we take in our revenue before we pay for our inventory and our team members. And so when you go from sales to no sales, you start losing cash very quickly. So we went from a point within 3 weeks, we would have gone from $200 million cash balance to negative $200 million within 3 weeks. So we had to quickly pivot to say, that's why I said went from euphoria to how are we going to survive this? And so everything you learn in your corporate finance class sometimes goes out the window when you're in the middle of a crisis. So, we quickly went and got a term loan very quickly, even though we had access to a $750 million revolving credit line. We weren't sure if we were going to get it. Even though we knew we were entitled to it, and that was going to take a little bit of time. So we went and borrowed money at a pretty good rate. Even though our treasurer was telling me, we're going to be okay, we're going to get this revolver. And my answer to him, and again, this is learning thing, is, are you going to risk the fact that we don't get the revolver and don't survive, or just go ahead and spend a little bit of money and get this term loan?
Yeah.
So we did that. We got the revolver. And then the national shutdown happened in April. By April, we felt like we had some cash because we got the term loan, we got the revolver, but we were still burning $20 or $30 million a week in cash because the dining rooms were still closed. The good news is we pivoted our business to an off-premise model, and because of our scale and our size, we were able to move that very quickly and much faster than maybe our competitors were able to do. But when you looked at the market and the equity markets, you saw all of the players in our space and a lot of retail that their equity was almost trading like an option. It wasn't trading like equity. It was people trying to decide who was going to survive and who wasn't.
Yeah.
And so, I went to the bankers and I were talking, investment bankers, and I said, why don't we just think about issuing equity? Because we didn't have any more debt capacity. We couldn't get any more debt. Nobody was going to give you any more debt. And so if you think about finance theory, you don't issue equity when your stock is trading really low, but we issued equity and our stock price went up. Because again, we were trading like an option, not a true equity. And so once we got the equity from our largest shareholders, they were in on this. They participated very well. And within a day after we issued equity, our stock price moved in a positive direction by a long way. And so now we felt we had the cash to do the things that we wanted to do to make ourselves stronger coming out of the pandemic than before we came into it. And as I said, we were already feeling really good going into the pandemic. So, as we got that equity, we were able to then turn our cash burn rate from a negative burn rate to building cash every week. And that happened from April to probably June. We were starting to build cash. And so very quickly we pivoted to how do we get stronger? And what we wanted to do was make sure that we kept our team members. So you might not know, but we own all of our restaurants. So these aren't franchise restaurants. Everybody that works in our restaurants works for us. And we had 160,000 active team members before COVID. And so we wanted to make sure that we protected them in some way until the government could step in. So we instituted an emergency pay program where we paid people for not working. We instituted, furlough pay. We furloughed managers, but we paid them 100% of their pay. But we said, don't even bother coming in. There's nothing for you to do. We did a lot of things. We instituted sick pay, which isn't something that casual dining, any restaurant company really has. Paid sick leave. We did that before we were planning on doing that before the pandemic, but we did it anyway. So as I said, we went from euphoria to figuring out if we were going to survive, but then we spent $100 million on our team, right? So we spent more than $100 million to take care of our team members. And now we were starting to build up. And so what I learned is, and I keep learning, is you have to remember what kind of business you're in. We are a people business, we're a service business, and we can't survive without our team. the good news is with those investments we made, we were able to open much faster than any of our competitors could open.
Yeah.
Other investment we made during that time is to make sure that all of our suppliers and landlords knew we were going to pay them. So a lot of these companies, a lot of these retailers basically stopped paying rent. We took this as an area of opportunity to say we're an investment grade credit company. We've always touted that. And so when landlords weren't getting paid by everybody else, we paid them. Sorry, the light just went out of my office.
No, that's all right. I
Okay.
like the Tuck logo too as you wave. That's good.
You like the logo?
Yeah.
So we paid them. But we told them, you got to remember that we're doing this. So whenever another deal comes to
Yeah,
play,
yeah.
we're the first ones to talk to. And that's been very, very positive for us. And then the good news is in June, actually in May, Georgia opened up, limited capacity, then other states opened up. California finally opened and then they shut down again. Now we've got a wave coming again, and you're seeing a lot of closures happening again. Illinois is basically shut down for anything but off premise. California is shutting down again. But then yesterday, the vaccine news came in, and we had the biggest one-day pop in our stock.
Yeah.
As today, our market cap and our enterprise value is higher than it was in January and February.
Really?
So yeah, we're about $500 million higher today than we were before the pandemic started.
Wow.
And that's because people are not looking at the next 6 months anymore. They're looking at 2 years from now.
Yep.
And because of the investments we've made, the things we've done to our business, they feel a lot better for us. And plus, we know there's going to be less competitors because there's a lot of restaurants going to close down for this. The last thing I learned, or not the last thing, but another thing I learned that I think we have to understand is no matter how much you try to not make it that way, everything is political. Everything. Because when you look at, we have a very good view of our team members and what's happening with COVID infection rates, et cetera. And we know that there's absolute zero difference in infection spikes with restaurants open than when they're closed. But the government is trying to find something to say we're doing something. So they're shutting restaurants down. If you know anything about what's happened over time, you think about Florida and Ron DeSantis, the governor here. He basically said Florida's open for business. No restrictions, do whatever you need to do. We have decided to make sure we follow CDC guidelines, keep 6 foot distances, et cetera. But we haven't seen spikes in the state of Florida like other places have that have shut down. And so I think hopefully when the postmortem is done, whenever that is, the people will realize that we politicized a little too much of this and it hurt a lot of people. And so that's something that one day I think people will figure out. But the fortunate thing for us is we have 200 restaurants in Florida. We have a lot of them in Georgia. We have a lot of them in Texas. They're not shutting down. And while we're seeing pockets of spikes like in San Antonio, not in San Antonio, in El Paso, the people are self-policing. When you see spikes come up, you don't have to shut down. There are people that are worried that they won't come out, but other people that'll go out and feel okay about it.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day we'll stop politicizing almost everything. I'm not going to say what side of the aisle I'm on there, but we've got to make sure that everything you do for the next whatever years is going to be politicized, which is unfortunate.
No, I hear you. And as someone in the academy, I'm biased, but the value of science and the scientific method informing everything we do, whether it's corporate strategy or public policy, should be paramount. So I'll pause there. Wow, great learning there, and also about I heard you say remembering what business you're in addition, like Kate, learning lots of things about health and safety. So Jim, please round this out. Learning for you as the CEO of Brooks, how did you all do that as we moved into March, April, and beyond at a personal level and for the firm that you lead?
Yeah, I think a lot of similarities, of course, but we actually had our European team got into it a week or two early, and we created this framework. We call it the Recover to Run plan, but it was phases, right? Retail's closed. That's phase one. That's disruptive. It's existential. It's about survival. We've got to cash flow through this thing, and there's no cash flow. All cash flow frozen. Yeah. Second phase is stores open, messy markets, inventory imbalances, but people begin running. And third is, races are back, the sport's back, and things start to stabilize. So in that first phase, it's hard to describe how crazy it was. And early decisions we made were cutting, POs to get some inventory out of the pipeline. But what we lost was our radar for consumer demand. And because it was all wired into demand planning through the stores and sensing retail sell-throughs weekly. We track retail sell-through at 80% of our distribution every week. And that went way down as the stores closed. So, we made a lot of phone calls to other brands that watched the curve go through China. We were talking to a lot of retailers and a lot of sister companies that watched the curve come through in China and Beijing and all the major cities, and what the demand recovery looked like, including companies like Dairy Queen, which is another Berkshire company, and the like. So we were trying to go to school on other markets that had already gone through this and how consumer demand and retail demand had recovered. But we really had to create a whole new radar that was sensing runner participation. And we literally did, park counts of runners through all of our field marketing people. We have 50 field marketing people. They were counting runners in parks and watching and it grew dramatically. We're using Strava data. We're using we have an inside group called Run Sites Lab that went digital, and we mirrored it after what IDEO does, really runner-centric, design thinking-oriented runner insight mining. But we set that whole team around to really assess how running was changing in this time, because those were the signals that would give us confidence to get through this and continue to order inventory, because we had about 2 months of cash. And what happened to us, this is another learning moment, Matt, is we're part of Berkshire Hathaway, and with 140 billion in cash, there's a comfort when it comes to the balance sheet. And about 3 weeks into it, end of March, the word came out from Berkshire's CFO that you should all try to live on your own balance sheets. And that was a wake-up call. That was a huge wake-up call, because that really created a sense of urgency. Okay, the goal here is we got to survive on our own balance sheet. So, like you were describing on takeout food, what we decided to do is our lifeboat was digital. It was our own e-commerce site, and most of our retailers have e-commerce business as part of their mix. In fact, of our total US business, 30% of it went through a website. It went as high as 80, it's back down to about 40. But we had to get paid for that 30% of revenue from Zappos, from Amazon, from Dick's Sporting Goods, from Fleet Feet Sports, from all of our major retailers. If they could pay us as we went on the digital business, we could cash flow it and get to the other side. And that's exactly what we did. And then on our runner signals, we saw that by the third week of April, weekly sell-throughs of our product at retail, all on digital with very few stores open, started to exceed the year before. So then we knew that running had made the cut. And so we turned back on our supply chain, filled in what we'd left. And we spent a lot of time, our partners are so critical in this to deliver the customers. So taking care of our employees, just a lot of work from our distribution centers and our headquarters, work from home, all the craziness on that, parents with their kids home from schools, et cetera, very disruptive everywhere in the world. Our factory partners we have strong partnerships, and we didn't make their day when we cut back production, but I think we reacted and were more agile quicker. So we went back and did town hall meetings with them and recommitted to that capacity and got more. And then with our retailers, we did a stimulus package. Frankly, we paid the freight for them to ship to home. We supported their curbside pickup. We pointed people to their stores and did a lot of promotion around it, because that's where the inventory was. We wanted that inventory to move and turn to cash. And so in those crazy couple months with everything so disrupted, the savior for us is the demand recovered dramatically. And then the retailers, we thought we were going to have a lot of receivable risk and write-offs and failed retailers. They've proven so resilient, and partly because this category made the cut. But the sporting goods retailers, many of them have been essential retailers because of the other products they carry. And so we were very fortunate in that regard, because our sport is still essentially completely shut down. There's virtual races going on, but
Yeah.
nobody's getting in a corral with 30,000 friends.
Yeah, I saw the New York Marathon was, people running through the boroughs on their own. Boston Marathon, they announced it's going to be in the fall at the earliest. And so, wow. Jim, thank you. That was great. And I heard you mention in particular, I heard you say that really need to learn in new ways about the fundamental demand. The customer radar was messed up. And so in new ways, through Strava, through putting people in parks and that kind of active lifelong learning, I heard all of you talk about as a theme. So that's great. I would say I'm happy for our attendees to join the conversation. So you can write something in the Q&A if you want, or I believe I have the capability, if you just want to raise your hand, I think I can turn on your mic and you can ask a question directly of either Kate or Rick or Jim or all of them. So if you've got questions, please just write them down in the Q&A or the chat. I'll monitor them both, or just raise your hand and I think I can just call on you and you can just ask it out loud. So having invited people into the conversation along with Kate and Rick, and I see Lulu, you've got your hand up. So let me see. I was hoping I could turn on, but Lulu, sorry, if you talk, let's see if we can hear you, or maybe Shannon can work her magic. Yeah, so I may have misspoken. Sorry, Lulu, if I set up the expectation that you could speak, I'm sorry. We're all learning different Zoom capabilities. So maybe Lulu, take a minute and just throw your question in the Q&A and I'll keep an eye out for it. And Shannon can override me if there's something technologically that we should be doing. So put your questions in the Q&A. I'll ask you guys just to assess very briefly while Lulu's typing and anybody else is thinking about asking a question. Here we are today in late November. Very briefly, Jim, I'll start with you. Like, how do you see the world now? You're optimistic. You feel like a Tigger. You're a little bit like Piglet. You're excited but concerned. Hopefully there's no Eeyores, but just kind of what's the sentiment and how do you voice it as a leader in particular? And Lulu, please step away. I'm keeping an eye out for your questions.
Yeah, let me go fast because this is a big topic. These are big questions. We think the next 6 months is going to be tough. The winter is going to be tough, right? The virus is surging all around the world, at least in Europe and here. There's still a lot of fear. A virus is on the way, but we've got this gap, or I'm sorry, pharmaceuticals are coming, but we've got this gap. And I think the winter's tough. It's very lonely. Psychologically, this has been really hard on people, right? And throw in all the social unrest and systemic racism conversations that have been created in the election. It's crazy time. So we think, just on people, the winter is going to be kind of tough. And so we had a town hall this morning with 300 retailers, and we're saying we got to get through this. We get into spring, our sport's going to turn back on next summer, I believe. And I think it's going to turbocharge participation. So we're just trying to really be scrappy, with our retail partners and try to get through this winter as best we can. And running is an antidote for stress. So, we're part of the solution here for people. But I think that's how we see it. We're very optimistic on 21 for our category. But we got to get through the winter, and people are working hard. This is a hard time for everybody, right? I think people have worked hard and under more stress than they ever have. It's not an easy time, but we think 21 is going to be bright.
Great. So winter and then brighter. Rick, Kate, how do you guys assess where you are now and look into the future?
I'll jump in. I think, our season normally tips off in October. And so because we finished our season in October this year, we really had to look at how we wanted to move forward. And I think to Jim's point, it looks like there may be a vaccine, but still it's unclear as to when to expect one. And so I think Jim said something interesting earlier too about being customer centric. We call them fans. And I think what we found through doing a lot of behavioral and surveys, behavioral research and surveys, is that fans are in really different places. I think, differently maybe than Rick framed it. There are some people who are quite happy to come back to entertainment options. There are others who may never or say that now. And so really trying to understand where fans are and how we can serve them in the same way and help them to kind of continue their fandom, while at the same time really thinking about, you know, the two drivers that I talked about that really are about how we make money. I think just really quickly, I learned that brand matters a lot, you know, throughout all of this. And I think I see Rick nodding, but really having a strong brand that means something to people and that people associate value with really has been something that is even more powerful now. I think Jim touched on this. Flexibility for our employees has been key. I've onboarded 5 or 6 people during the pandemic, and so they've never actually met anyone in 3D. And so, you know, how do you find a way to integrate yourself into an organization? And then I have several people who are, you know, managing their toddlers at home whilst still working. All of that requires a different model for how we think about supporting people and really what it means to be a manager these days is just really different. And then lastly, I mean, and this is a little bit trite, but I do feel like from the bubble or the wobble, we learned a lot about innovation. So things that we were thinking about doing in a couple years, because we didn't have fans in the arena, we tried it. And so there's a bunch of things that we learned really, really quickly about camera angles, broadcast, you know, all of the different ways to engage fans in a virtual way. And sort of to tease Lulu's question, like gathered a bunch of data that is really going to help us really think about what's next and where we want to go. And I would say, I think from, you know, I have a little bit longer term view perhaps than Jim, and that I think the winter is going to be pretty tricky. And this is just Kate talking, not the NBA. But I also think for entertainment businesses, especially those that are live entertainment, I think, you know, we're going to have to look at new ways of engaging people going into multiple years.
Yeah, no, that's great. Rick, tell me about the future. Then I can see 3 questions, so I'm gonna channel my NBA referees and watch the clock closely as we move through the questions. But Rick, really quickly on as you look to the future, and then we'll go to Lulu and a couple other questions.
Yeah, I'll go quick. I think if you would have asked me that 2 weeks ago, I'd have felt a little bit better about the next few months. But now with the spike and what's happening in a lot of these areas that are shutting down, you start feeling a little bit more nervous about it. I don't think we're going to get to a point where we were in April, where the entire country is going to shut down, et cetera. But, you know, you're starting to see places close back up again. The good news is we're ready for it now. We weren't ready for it before. Right. I do think, at least in our space, all of the research says that people, the number one thing people want to do when this is over is go out to eat with their families and friends. So we feel really good about what's going to happen whenever that happens.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking to investors today, and one of them brought up, you know, after the 1918 pandemic, there was a roaring 20s.
Right.
There might be some euphoria after this is all over. We don't know what that's going to be, and we don't know when that's going to be. But we do believe that after this is over, it's going to be pretty strong for a little while.
Yeah.
We just have to be ready to cover that. We just don't know what it's going to be like in the next 6 months. I thought it would be better, but maybe not.
No, I hear. You know, the numbers are not great around the world, but we'll see. I got it. So I hear an optimism in all of you, which is great. Very optimistic. It's a question of kind of from here to there, and is that 6 months plus or minus? Lulu's a T22, so you guys know, and she's got so we got about 15 minutes at most, 13, 15 minutes. So 2-part question, one specific to you, Jim, and then to the others. And Kate, thanks for previewing. The question for you, Jim, is how long had Brooks been developing its runner-centric data gathering resource? And then for Kate and Rick, how do you guys have comparable kind of analytical centers? How do you thread data into what I'll call your core operations? On Lulu's question, just your learning. So Jim, you first, and then Kate and Rick on this for a couple minutes.
Sure. Yeah, we did an IDEO project to really drive innovation in 2010. And part of the goal, and I told them that we ended up doing 3 or 4 with them, was for them to teach us how to fish. So we created our Run Sites Lab probably in 2016, and it was very product focused around product insights and footwear, and then apparel and run bras. And so it's been driving product for about 4 years, but we turned it to the whole brand and participation and runner mindsets probably about 2 years ago. So it was a key asset for us to learn fast in this recent craziness of COVID.
That's great. Thanks. And Kate and Rick, how have you guys been gathering information and kind of processing it into your operations and the decision making at your level and the C level? Kate, you alluded to it briefly, but you want to say a little bit more?
Yeah, I have the benefit of also looking across our central research and data team. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is everything from basketball data, like what stats did we see that were different from the bubble based on, maybe lack of travel, a different kind of environment. All the way through to fan behaviors and how they responded to certain messages in certain geos. And so we are constantly pulling information and trying to thread that through not just our marketing, but how we look at the game, how we look at innovations for the future. There's still a long way to go. I came from Silicon Valley, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to go even deeper. But we're definitely using a lot of data today.
That's great. Thank you. And Rick?
Yeah, and one of the benefits of the pandemic was we had a lot more sales go through digital channels than we had in the past, right? If you think about most people coming to eat, they'll pay with a credit card, and it's a lot harder to track that person in some way, shape, or form. But so and now we have more data than anybody in our space. So, but now we've been able to capture even more, to use that to market to them based on what they buy versus just market, kind of more of a broad marketing. But a lot of the data that we use and analyze with our data analytics team is really more operational data. It's a little less about the customer, which we have a lot of great data there. But as I said, we have 1,800 factories. We have 1,800 restaurants that all do things a little bit differently in some way, shape, or form. And so we're able to use that data to schedule better, hire better, train better, and do those things. Not as sexy as the guest data, but we do a lot with that too. And the good news, as I said, the pandemic has helped us capture more of that than we ever had.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So information, an even more important asset. Thank you. And Kate, if you're looking for data externally, in 5th grade, I had a single double. I poured in 10 points in one game. So if you guys are really looking to go really kind of...
That'll help me refine the model a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And I have 4 years of eligibility college, so I can do that still. And Ron Andrew, one of my great faculty colleagues, has a question for all of you. Over the past 6 months, we've seen an amazing combination of underreaction and overreaction from leaders like you. How has that changed the way your organization and leadership team is thinking about calibrating reactions moving forward, especially given the expectation of more uncertainty to come? As we were just saying, uncertainty about 6 months, 3 months, and how different it might be. So how do you? Yeah, there we are. Who wants to take that one first?
I'd love to go because I am living this right now. In Seattle, Amazon and Microsoft are closed way through to next year. Our schools are still not open, but our employees are really wanting more information from us on what our future work mode is going to be. Not only next year, but post-COVID, post-fear, post-vaccine. And we were working a certain way on February 1, which I love, very collaborative, connected company. We're very human to human. And now we're working a certain way on November 1st. And I can't get my leadership team to think beyond our current mode. It's recency bias, right? So I'm talking a lot about, these filters we all use in decision-making and the biases you have. We have to envision what the new normal will be. And so it's science driven, but it's not just science, it's human behavior, right? And how things will change, and they will change. But what have we learned? What's innovative? What do we want to keep? But are we going to be closer to February 1 or November 1? And so, getting our teams thinking that way, because we have to reset our offices and employees want to know. So talk about a decision-making mode. Right now, the team would entirely overreact to the mode we're in this current point in time. And I happen to believe we're actually going to be closer to February 1st, but we're having big debates on that right now. And I'm using recency bias as a way of, look, you have to think ahead on, the essence of who we are and the essence of work and life for people. There's going to be changes, but we're struggling with it. It's not easy. It's not.
And Jim, I'll say you kindly hosted a Tuck alumni event a couple years ago. I remember at your offices and the vibrancy there. I hadn't thought about this. To see, hear you say that. It's clear you guys have a way of work, which is very much like us at Tuck. It's collaborative, a lot of just serendipity, and so I both empathize and sympathize.
Yeah, and we've onboarded 50 employees that have never.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? Same situation as Kate described. So yeah, I'm living this one right now. It's hard.
Got it. Kate, Rick, any thoughts on this question from Ron about?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think from our standpoint, we are also incredibly collaborative. We just went through an office remodel to make a whole open plan office where no one has any offices, and it's all one big floor. And so we had to really rethink how people can be in the office, how we would want to reopen, and I think Jim's right. It's a lot about behavior. I also think it's very similar to our fans, in that some people are really keen to go into the office. They don't want to work out of their 1-bedroom apartment anymore. They want to see people. But there are other folks who decided to move home to their parents' house or are in a different part of the country. And so we really, I think, need to understand our employees a lot more. And that's not just at the league, where we have, a ton of employees here in New York and New Jersey, but it's also across the 30 teams. And, we also have, 450 players that have all very different thoughts and feelings about safety. And so we really have to think about all of those constituent groups as we're really starting to think about, when do we start our season again? Very soon. How do we do that? What ways do make people feel comfortable? And how do we meet people where they are? Because, there are some people who still don't have childcare or kids in schools, and that's just the reality of where they are. And so expecting them to be in the office is just not a non-starter.
Yeah. We talk a lot about that heterogeneity of people's ability and preferences to do certain things in person versus remote, and trying to respect and honor that wherever people are and without judgment. So,
And I'll be really quick on kind of the overreaction, underreaction. I think the way we have to be as leaders is to Jim's point on the recency bias. You can't think about what's going on today. You got to think about what the future looks like. And we have a way to think about it that is never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems, right? And as a leader, you have to project that. And I think this has really helped that. And for me, I try to be a counterbalance to whatever the CEO is saying. There are some times that he is just, because he's a little bit more on the recency side, so I'm not gonna. He knows that. And so when things are great, I always tell him it's not as great as you think. And when they're bad, we're doing okay. And so someone's got to be that kind of voice of reason. So when you get to these positions down the road, remember that it's never as good as it seems right now, and it's never as bad as it seems right now.
Yeah, we call it the Rick rule from now on. I like that. I got it, Rick. I wrote it down. We've only got a few minutes, so Kate, it's a question directed to you in the NBA, but I want to allow, if you can do it in like a minute, to have Rick and Jim come in as well, because we're all living this. Question for Kate: amidst the pandemic, the NBA also responded to another crisis in the United States, the death of George Floyd and the protests and demonstrations against racial injustice. The marketing response from the NBA to this was quite exemplary. This is an anonymous, so I'm not sure who in our audience, but it made this person really proud to be a fan of the game. Can you speak to how you crafted a very powerful marketing strategy to respond to this moment in the U.S. And how you incorporated feedback from your largely African-American players in the decision making? I'm sure we could spend a half hour, 2 hours on this, but
yeah, I'll be really quick.
I want to give Rick and Jim a chance to comment on Black Lives Matter and more generally issues of racial injustice and just the social issues that we're all living with as well. But I'll start with you, Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for the big compliment from Anonymous. The NBA is a values-driven organization, and we have been for a really long time. We're driven by the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, going back 70 years to when, we stood up and broke the color barrier in basketball. That's continued through Bill Russell, all the way up to what you see from some of our most prominent players today. And with the deaths of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, it really felt very deeply personal to our players and a lot of our executives as we were restarting the season. And so it was really clear to us to use that season restart as an opportunity to address that head on. And then with the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, that became a hometown issue for the Milwaukee Bucks. And so it was really clear that, we really needed to have a voice on this, and our fans were with us. Our fans, that are the youngest in professional sports, they're the most diverse in professional sports, really stood with us and would have been disappointed had we not stood up and said something. And so, we're really fortunate that our values are matched with our fans. But for us, it was a very natural thing. And I think, as a white executive in a league that is primarily Black, I'll never know the struggles that my colleagues experience, but I do feel really strongly in standing with the league and the players as they speak out on, these really terrible things that continue to happen. And so I think, we'll continue to talk about that. And we've obviously invested in the NBA Foundation and a coalition to address exactly these issues for the next several years, because it's not going to be a one-time thing.
Wow. Thank you, Kate. And Jim, Rick, briefly, how have your organizations addressed issues of either?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I think, when Ahmaud Arbery was killed out jogging, literally stalked and ambushed, our industry, a conversation began. And then George Floyd, it really spread everywhere. So, we have always thought about running being one of the most inclusive sports in the world, and the competitive sport is very integrated and diverse. But the truth of the matter was, it wasn't welcoming and safe and inclusive as it could be. So big conversation created. We're right in the middle of it. It's both the right thing to do and include everyone into the sport we all love. And it's an incredible opportunity. Women were included from the 70s after Title IX, and they've driven our sport for the last 2 generations. We need to include everyone in. So it's created a needed conversation in our sport.
Thanks, Jim. Rick?
And I'll be really quick. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, similar to Kate, is we're a values-based company, but we also provide opportunity for people that might not have the same opportunity as others, to get people that might not have college degrees and barely have high school degrees to be able to support their family by managing restaurants and et cetera. So our CEO started as an hourly employee. He doesn't have a college degree. I started as an hourly employee here at Darden. I do have a degree, and so we're the top 2 people in the company. So we make sure that we try to give people opportunity, anybody that can succeed here. I'm the chair of the Darden African American Network because we thought it was very important for the most senior person that's not the CEO to lead that network at Darden, to let people know how important that population is and what we do for the for all of our team members, not just the Black community or the Hispanic community, but all of them. Our restaurants represent the communities they serve, and we're really proud of that.
I appreciate that so much. What you guys have shared. Time is out, but it's gonna be quick. We're gonna put 30 seconds back on the game clock. Joe Gladow is a T21 longtime Brooks customer. Jim, you should know he's a Brooks customer. Asked a great closing question, which is, you guys have, and I'm editorializing. You guys have been phenomenal in sharing kind of your journey through the calendar months of 2020 here, and taught us a lot about being active, lifelong, wise, decisive leaders. Mm-hmm. Joe's question is about, if you look into the longer term, are there changes you see in your specific spaces of retail, entertainment, dining that you see coming out of this? So very briefly, to respect people's time, especially yours most of all, in like 10 seconds each, is there a long-term trend or issue you find yourself as a lifelong learner saying, this is going to be on our to-do list to contemplate? Kate, we'll start with you.
Yeah, less than 1% of our fans can ever attend a game in person. And so this pandemic has given us an opportunity to really think about a number of different ways to engage fans, that will continue to not be in person.
Great. Rick?
Yeah, I think in our space, the bigger companies are going to have an advantage over the independents, and that you see that now. I don't see a lot of change in full service restaurant dining, other than the technology is going to be a bigger part of that. And maybe you'll see a little bit more off-premise business, but not to the level where people are thinking. We're going to get back to a more normal level because people like the experience that they had. And I think that, and we think they miss it.
And Jim, at the buzzer, it's gonna be string music. The long-term idea you're thinking about?
Pump fake, obviously all the digital trends have massively accelerated, and I think we were on that path. You got to engage digitally with people, but running is a non-digital human experience, and the good news is it made the cut. We think it's going to create a running boom that we can see for the next 5 years, and we feel fortunate for that. But people are going to get outdoors and replenish themselves. That's long term.
You all belong on Sports Center tonight at 11, so that's great. And but thank you all. Thanks for the great questions from colleagues and students alike. But most of all, Jim, Rick, and Kate, thank you for modeling the kind of wise and decisive leadership that we teach and develop at Tuck, and all you guys are doing for the world. So thanks to all of you. Keep well, and we'll see you guys before too long. And all of our students and colleagues, thanks for the evening. Keep well, and we'll see you around the halls, literally and metaphorically, in the days ahead.